Today we're going to learn how to divide when there's a decimal in the divisor. So I'm going to start with the problem 8 4/10, and I'm going to divide it by 2/10. Now if you remember, when we were dividing with fractions, we had to actually turn it into a multiplication problem first because we really couldn't divide by a fraction. The same sort of thing goes for dividing by a decimal. We can't really do it. So what we have to do first of all is get rid of the decimal. We're doing it by multiplying, but I'm going to teach you a little bit of a shortcut. The first thing we have to do is we have to move the decimal. In this case, it's like we're multiplying by 10. We're going to move it one place to the right. But if I do it in the divisor, I have to do it in the dividend as well. So if I bounce the decimal one place to the right in the divisor, I'm going to do that in the dividend as well. So if you notice, if I put in new decimals, I'm going to rewrite my problem, and it's going to end up looking like 84 divided by 2. Then I solve it just like normal. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I subtract, compare, that's okay. So I bring down my 4. Sorry, that looks more like a 9. 2 goes into 4 2 times. I multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract, compare, that's okay. And so my answer is 42. So what this really means is if I look back up at my original problem, the question was how many 2/10 are there in 84? I'm sorry, in 8 4/10. So you end up with there are 42 of them. I'm going to do another example so you can follow along. Okay, this example is going to look like 6, and we're going to divide it by 2/100. Now the first thing you might notice right away is that there is no decimal in the 6. But you can remember, we can add a decimal. We just put the decimal at the end of the number like this. So using the directions from the first part of the video, I have to move the decimal in the divisor to get rid of it. If I times it by 100, that means I'm bumping it 2 places to the right. If I do that in the divisor, I can also do that in the dividend. Now that looks kind of silly because it's still a 6 with this weird looking thing underneath it. So what we do is then we can put in zeros to fill in those spaces. Always rewrite your problem after you bounce your decimal. It gets a little confusing and you kind of get confused about where to put your decimals. So when I rewrite this number, it ends up being 600. And then if you look at my divisor, it would be 002. But to make it easier, I'm just going to make it 2. So 2 goes into 6 3 times. 2 times 3 is 6. I subtract. And if you notice, all I have left are zeros to bring down. If you only have zeros to bring down, you can put your zeros up. So if you look back at that original problem, how many 2/100 are in 6? There are 300. Okay, let's try one together. Write this on a piece of paper. 496 divided by 8/10. Okay, my first step, remember, is to get rid of that decimal. So I need to bounce my decimal, and I have to move it one place to the right to get rid of it. In 496, there isn't a decimal, but if you remember, we can add a decimal at the end of the number. If I bounce the decimal to the right one place in the divisor, I have to move it one place to the right in the dividend as well. So remember, that allows me to put a 0 in there. Do you remember what the next step is? You're right, rewrite the whole problem. Now don't forget that 0 that we added on, so it becomes 4,960 divided by 8. Again, there's 0 in front of the 8 up above, but you don't need to have that 8. It's like that scoreboard 0 we've talked about. Now I solve it like normal. Does 8 go into 4? No, it does not. It goes into 49 6 times. 8 times 6 is 48. I subtract. I have 1 left over. Compare, that's okay to do, so I bring down my 6. Now I'm going 8 into 16, that goes in 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. I subtract. I have 0 left over, that's okay to do. So I bring down my 0. Now don't forget to finish the problem, because if you noticed up here, after we put that X, we have room for 3 numbers in our quotient, in our answer. And remember, every time I bring something down, I have to put something up. So even though I have zeros left down in the below, I have to still go into it. So how many times does 8 go into 0? 0 times. 8 times 0 is 0. I subtract. Nothing left over, nothing to bring down, so my answer would be 620. How did you do? Okay, one more problem to try. This time we're going to start with lots of zeros. So we're going to have 96 thousandths, and we're going to divide that by 3/10. Same exact step. We need to get that decimal out of there first. How many places do we bump it? If you said 1, you're right. We move it 1 place. So then I have to come over here and I have to move it 1 place in the dividend as well. So when I rewrite this number, I can leave those extra zeros out if I want. I don't have to, but I can. In this case, because I moved the decimal, and that would put 2 zeros in front of the decimal, I'm going to just put 1. I can get rid of that extra scoreboard 0. Now I'm going to solve this just like normal, but notice there's still a decimal in my dividend, which means that I'm going to have a decimal in my answer. So does 3 go into 0? No, it does not. Before, we would put an X up there, but when we're talking decimals, that X is actually going to be a 0. So 3 goes into 0 0 times. I subtract. Compare, that's okay. I bring down. Now I'm going into 9, so 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. I subtract. Compare, that's okay. I bring down my 6. Now my new problem is 6 divided by 3, so 3 goes into 6 2 times. That's 6. I subtract. I compare. It's okay to have a 0 left over. There's nothing else to bring down. So as far as doing the work, my problem is done, but there's one more thing I need to do. Do you remember what it is? That's right. You have to bring that decimal up, straight up. That's why it's really important to rewrite the problem, is so that you're not bringing the decimal up in the wrong place. I hope this helps. If it is confusing on some problems, please go back and rewatch the video. It might help you.